everybody.
Hi.
That's very good. All right. I'm really informal when I give a talk, so if you have a question, just kind of shoot a hand up, or if you're Vic, throw something at me, and we can talk a little bit. So this is the cover of our book. I'm sorry Fred is late. He's coming up from Carlsbad and probably got lost. So, or he went through PCH, and there is stuff going on in PCH. So we're going to just start. So here's the cover of our book. We've been working on it. We worked on it for 10 and a half years, solid. We picked a date, January 1, 2003, said that's the first date we're going to work on this. We didn't start early. I knew in November we were going to do this, so I had a couple months. I didn't touch anything. All new photos and fresh writing. So we didn't use our old stuff at all. And let's just move on here. There is me with one of my favorite plants. And there's Freddie, so you know if he comes in the door, clap. It'll really freak him out. Okay, and excuse me, Fred and I met in junior high school, so we've known each other for a really long time. So the question here is wildflowers in Orange County, and that's a real picture of Orange County, the central part of Orange County. Right now where we are, we're way in the upper left corner by the beach, and that's Orange Hill. You might recognize it. Great place to take photos. I'm in their parking lot all the time taking photos, and it's a good restaurant too. But, so, are there wildflowers in Orange County? Well, yes, there are. And they look like this. That was good. Let's have more of that. Okay. And then they look like this. That's all right. Better, much better. Okay. So these are all local things. And by local, I mean they're in Orange County and the surrounding areas. Many of them were shot here at Bolsa Chica. Okay, and up in the Santa Ana Mountains, which is a really beautiful place. These are the mountains in the distance you can see on a nice clear day. They're just beautiful. This is a view from North Main Divide Road. It's just incredible chaparral-covered hills. In the distance on the upper right, those are the San Gabriel Mountains, way over there. So the fog area is the LA Basin. So you've got LA in between there. Just a beautiful place. Fred and I have been hiking there our whole lives. Now, there are all kinds of great habitats. You know where this was taken, very close by, just down the road over here a little bit. Very hard to find this habitat pristine, it really is, here in Orange County, but I did my best. Look around, there are a lot of wildflowers in this picture. Let's zoom in on one, shall we? Like that. Isn't that fantastic? That's good, I like the reaction. So, this is Beach Evening Primrose, and it grows all over Bolsa Chica. You can probably see them out the window here, across the street. They're even in cultivation. You can grow these in your yard. They love sandy soil, super deep roots. They're just wonderful things. And then this is Dana Point Headlands, where you've got coastal sagebrush scrub community, mostly with California sagebrush as the dominant species. But California sagebrush comes in a blue-green form that everybody knows about, and a silvery form that no book ever talks about. And that's a silvery form right at my fingertips, right there. You can see them intermixed. So Dana Point Headlands has both forms, and so does Upper Newport Bay. And one of the things you find there is Blockman's Live Forever, named for a high school teacher from the turn of the century, the other turn of the century for you youngsters. It's a little tiny thing. And then you get things like this in Limestone Canyon that just carpeted with pink. Let's zoom in on those things. It looks like that. They're in the Carnation family, so they're delicate little beauties called ground pink, because it turns the ground pink. They're just beautiful little things. So we get things like grassland. This is purple needlegrass, the state grass of California. It's all these bunches in these hillsides. And then in other parts of the same grassland, the same place, just a little different spot, this is also purple needlegrass, but with Padres shooting stars coming up like that, which is white near the coast. Once you go over the mountains, they are magenta. Same species though. And then just above the two pictures you see some blue-green popping up, and that's this guy here called School Bells, and it's also on the cover of the book. Then you get things like this over in the O'Neill Land Conservancy as well. Bush monkey flower and sagebrush and redberry and sumac, all kinds of great things on this incredible hillside. Looking from Casper's Park, you see the peaks up there. And Casper's is a great place to see everything, pretty much. And I'm sure you know what those little patches of orange are throughout the hills. Everybody say it? Mustard is yellow, mostly. So orange is going to be California poppy, state flower of California. Right. Now, here's the thing with poppies, California poppy. Around here, it's a component of dry areas like this. In central California, along the immediate coast up in Monterey, excuse me, they live in more mesic sites, wetter places. You get a bigger flower, an oranger flower, more succulent foliage, and it needs more water. Where down here, it can handle more drier conditions, and the flowers are a little smaller, like that. You can see how they're a little more delicate. That is the same place. I turned the camera from here to here and walked about 5 feet and photographed something. So they're totally accessible. When you buy a seed pack of Cal poppies, it's from Central California. The big succulent ones that do not persist. So you should not buy seed packs and spread them out at Bolsa Chica. That's the wrong plant. You need locally collected seed. South Main Divide Road, those white bushes there are each about 8 feet tall and about 10 feet wide, and they go for miles when they're in bloom. Now if you zoom in on them, they look like that. That is thick-leaved California lilac. We have 11 species of this locally. 11. Pretty incredible. And they all have beautiful flowers. They sure are. They're very, very strong. When you drive along or take a highway when this is in bloom, you just open your windows a bit and you can bring the perfume right in. It actually has a really heavy perfume. Each flower is very small. This is shot with a macro lens.
Is that a Ceanothus?
Yes, it is. Ceanothus is the genus, and sometimes it's used for the common name. It's Ceanothus crassifolius, which means leaves with white hairs. And then Elsinore Peak, which Vic and I have taken field trips to, down South Main Divide Road. You get, I know the towers aren't pretty, but it's a preserved area, that's good. But in the foreground, you get that. That was this year. So that picture is one of the few I'll show you that's not in the book. This I just wanted to show everybody. It is a dry year, but we had some good wildflowers this year too. And that was this year on that spot.
What is it?
That is Coast Baby Star. And it's a phlox, species of phlox about that tall. Little tiny thing. It's got yellow flowers, or it can have white flowers, or pink, or purple flowers. So in Limestone Canyon, you get the white version. Up on Elsinore, you get the yellow. And it's in cultivation. You could buy the seeds of this. Grow it in your yard.
Those color differences.
Pardon?
Those color differences?
Uh-huh.
Do they habitat? Do they genetics?
Nobody knows. Someone needs to study it. And then up in the Santa Ana Mountains, you get royal beard tongue. This thing is about 5 feet tall, sometimes 6 feet tall. It's an incredible, beautiful plant, and they're just all over the place. So there you go. And then we actually have real forests in our area. Real live forests. That's a real forest. It's got southern mixed evergreen forest with conifers and alders and sycamores. There's a montane riparian woodland going through the bottom, so there's actually water. Okay, beautiful place. I love this photo. This field looked like this year too. And this is a field on Majeska Peak with broken rock. We call that talus. Talus slope that faces south, which is crazy because south facing is hot, dry, especially rock. Radiant heat comes up, just fries these things. They are carnations. They're little carnations about that big. And they're really delicate. They blow in the wind. They're extremely hard to photograph. They're a native carnation in the carnation family. And they're just lovely little things. And there's this huge field of them on this broken rock that hardly anything else will grow on. And there is one of the sweet little flowers right there. It's just a neat little flower. It's Douglas's stitchwort, it's called. It is a type of carnation. And then one of my other favorite talus slopes on Majeska Peak that I've been looking at for years and years. I want you to just look at that and give me a color that you see in the picture.
Blue.
Okay, a blue.
Lavender.
There's a little black. There's a little.
Lavender.
Anything else? Okay.
Yellow.
There are some yellow. If you really look at it, it's kind of hard. Television changes the appearance of the pictures just a little bit. But let's zoom in there and see if you got it right. How about that? How about sapphire?
Oh, wow.
Okay, that's one of the larkspurs in the genus Delphinium. You might know it from Delphinium. It's liver-leaved larkspur because its basal leaves have 3 big lobes like your liver. And the other two species of larkspur we have, Terry's larkspur, has different leaves and more of a purpley flower. And then Scarlet Larkspur is bigger than me and is red flower. And is a wonderful hummingbird pollinated plant. And they're all in the book. There it is right there. Okay. How easy is it to find this stuff? I shot that out my car window on Long Canyon Road. There was a big fire, and boom, this stuff came up. Scarlet Larkspur and golden eardrops, which is a poppy that gets 7-8 feet tall in the background. Just a beautiful thing. And that picture is in the book, Under Fire. Well, where did we come up with the idea for field guides? We have to have a nod to Roger Torrey Peterson, who came up with the idea of pointing out characteristics of birds, characteristics you need to know in order to identify them. And when he released this field guide in 1934, right around there, birding in this country exploded. People went nuts. They went crazy for this book. Went, oh my gosh, this is wonderful. I can identify the birds that I see because someone's pointing to the characteristics. Now, we talked a little bit about putting arrows in the Wildflower book. We opted not to put arrows on most photos, but a few of them do have some arrows when there's a little feature you're looking for. But he came up with that idea. So really, he's the king of the field guide. Other people, oh, this is the history thing I meant not to show, but we'll just do it fast. And other people came up with field guides. I'm just going to race through this part here. This is a famous guy, Ann Struther Davidson, who came here to Bolsa Chica and collected plants in Newport and along the coast here. And his buddy John Muir and their buddy Andrew Carnegie, who like to fund projects like this, and he wrote Plants of LA County. So there's that. Leroy Abrams, who grew up in LA, wrote a book on flora of Los Angeles and vicinity. He's hiding right over there. Became a professor at Stanford University. I do know that because my relative hired him. My relative was David Starr Jordan, the first president of Stanford. And he hired Dr. Abrams to teach botany. And then, of course, the works by Munns, California Flora and Supplement, and Flora of SoCal, which things that Fred and I grew up with. Barbara Collins and her books, I should say, on flowering plants. Some of you may know her work. All right. This is a plant specimen that Fred had pressed. Did you want to step in here, Fred?
Sure, I can step in there. So the reason I threw this picture in here was, one, it kind of shows you this. You can't quite read the label on the plant on the left, but that's what the real science looks like behind the Wildflower book, the distance where you start looking at the real specimens that were recorded. And actually, I started working on this stuff as much as 30 years ago. So the Wildflower book is actually fairly recent. That's the last 10 years we've really been working on it, trying to put something out that actually everybody can interpret rather than just being a real scientist and looking down to dry localities. And then Bob took those dry localities I had for my herbarium inventory and put them into a nice, neat format back around 2003, 2004. This was just another example. One of the plants that was one of the more interesting ones in the Wildflower Guide. This plant was first found back in the, I think it's over here, but what the date was on that.
1922.
1922 by a grad student for Munns, and he got a plant named after him. But it was also an extremely difficult plant to find. That the records you're looking at on the bottom of the right-hand page here, in about 2000, that's all the records we had for this plant. It was very, very few people had seen it. And Bob had figured out that I was like the 11th person to ever see this plant. And I guess my wife was probably the 12th person to see it. And Bob spent an inordinate amount of time trying to photograph this plant, going up the top of the Sand Mountains. I guess I should have said the name of it here. This is San Diego Peak Celia, and there's a picture of it on the right. It's a very nice herbarium specimen. You see, it looks like a little thing. I don't remember who actually did that one.
1989.
Yeah. Anyway, so the problem is that it's a fire follower, and you just don't see this plant unless you have a fire nearby. It's got very, very limited distribution. One plant in the Agua Mountains, no one's quite sure where the actual parent population is because they got it downstream in a sort of a washdown area. And then the top of the Santa Ana Mountain is really the main area for it. And we had a fire back in 1983 84, 83, and that's what we were working on the first round we got this day. And, but then we had the San Diego fire in 2007, and that got the entire peak. So when Bob got up there again, he found this thing, and he made sure that not only was there a newspaper article about it, that he led tours up there. Now we have no idea how many people have actually seen this thing. Sort of one of the fun parts of the thing. If you're familiar with me, when I used to do a lot more work up in Orange County, I have a couple books I had done previously that cover our area, vascular plants of Orange County. First there was a couple checklists, and then there's a sort of annotated checklist. And it's sort of like, if you want to see all the plants in Orange County, you go to that book. But with the exception of a handful of nice illustrations and drawings, it's not going to have the the pretty colors and stuff you're going to find in the current wildflower book. We only cover about half the species of the wildflower book. It's really hard to cover everything because it's already a huge book. And then I think basically there's a counterpart in Riverside County. It's a little older, but it covers the Gavilan Hills, Dempsco, and the east side of the Santa Mountains, which is also in the wildflower book. These were all done prior to the completion of this book. If you have a copy of our book, and if you've seen a copy of our book, you open it up, one of the first things you have is the table of contents. It's like a table of contents, gives you a general idea about where to find things. We don't really need to talk about that in detail. There's a nice map up in the front. My main contribution, I'm actually sort of a graphics artist also, so I get really excited about maps and geography and stuff, and so I was pretty happy to sit down and actually make the map for this book. Yeah, it's kind of exciting to do it by email where I'll say, well, how about this, and Bob will throw in more things if you miss something or something like that to fill it in. And of course there was a timeline here because I was about to take off to Australia. And I didn't manage to get everything into it. I got most stuff in before it's done. So the mapping has most of the features that are discussed in the book in terms of places you can go see wildflowers. The original core of the book was going to be basically Wildflowers of Orange County, but it ended up being Wildflowers of Orange County and the Sand Mountains, and then sort of the Sand Mountains and the Puente Hills and the Chino Hills. It spread out a little bit. But as you can see through there's a core area on there. Now the reason, of course, we end up spreading into some of these adjacent areas was, as Bob loves to say, is that you're staying on the edge of the Orange County line. You just ignore the plants that are on the other side of it. I actually learned to do that a lot over the 30 years beforehand, and it was, there's a certain element of peace of mind if you can actually call a stop somewhere. But anyway, so the idea here was that, yeah, you were just going to cover the entire mountain range. I mean, theoretically, the argument goes to the other side of the freeways as well, but you got to stop someplace. So the main portion actually stops at the 15 and the 60 and pretty much the 605 with a couple exceptions. Some of Bob's friends really wanted to see things like the Eldorado Nature Center included, so that got in. And the Whittier Narrows Recreation Area got in. It was actually a very brief period of time where we kept asking, should we keep throwing a few more things in here? We'd like to have actually made it end Camp Pendleton, but it was a little hard to get access to Camp Pendleton. So we kind of sneak around the edges on that. It's actually pretty good for Camp Pendleton. In fact, actually, when we sat down and started looking at the way this book works, it's a little less important for you guys because, well, you're kind of in the middle of the book and you don't have to worry about it. This is the slightly important for other people, is that it's actually really pretty good for anything that's in cismontane, Southern California, that is anything below 6,000 feet or so. So there's Orange County, and here's the main, where the book covers, and that's actually, it really covers a much larger area. All right. Oh, there we go. So we have an introduction, and it's a great introduction. So you should actually sit down and read it. It's not particularly long. It starts out with an overview of the geology and the geography of Orange County and the climate. And apparently the original write-up for the geography and geology was a little longer than what ended up in the book. Quite a bit longer, actually, but for this type of book, we didn't really need to get into detail, and there was always space considerations. So just a few pictures scattered in amongst them to sort of illustrate those points. One of the more interesting sets of pictures we've got in here is some oblique aerials that one of Bob's friends took. It was a little late. Had he talked to me back in the 1980s, my dad had an airplane, we could have taken all the aerials, but he decided to wait 15 years before getting this going. I actually probably had these someplace, but he got really nice photos. And so these just going to give you some idea of some of the features if you're looking up from an airplane. And I think it's a really nice little touch to get some relationships. There we go. About wildflowers, we give you kind of an overview of some of the parts and things you should learn and or know to do good identification. Now, of course, we've got lots and lots of photographs, and they're good photographs, so you probably could just thumb through the book, but it doesn't actually hurt to learn a few of the terminology and things that actually go along with identification on it. Yeah, and so we had some nice little illustrations which illustrate the terms that are actually in the text. And we have a little bit of background on the plant communities and habitats in Orange County. Here showing you this. I love this little map. This is, if you were back in the 30s and 40s, everybody did this sort of map when they did some habitat. You don't see it as much anymore. For sure, it shows the biotic zones. So actually, our area does a really nice cross section where you can start with the coastal hills, the Pacific Ocean, coastal hills, roll up the mountains and down the backside. And this sort of just gives you a feeling for where the main habitats, coastal sage scrub and foothills, chaparrals, and on the foothills, and then mixed evergreens at the highest elevations. It'd be a little bit more dramatic if we had the San Bernardino Mountains or the San Gabriel Mountains. So this is St. Anna Mountains. It's a relatively low mountain range. Then there's we have about 15 different plant communities covered. Yep, just as I'm going to watch that hitting the buttons twice. Anyway, so that was showing basically that we had a little paragraph describing the different plant communities, and then each has an accompanying photograph to give you a little bit of feeling for what it looks like. A few of them, like the vernal pools at Fairview Park. Anyway, for pictures like this, we actually have some where we show, like Fairview Park has two, one in a dry condition and one in a wet condition. So we've arranged each plant group by each by the major plant group, and here we've got the magnolias and the eudicots and monocots. Those are somewhat, these eudicots and magnolias are a very, very new term. If you've got the California flora, you're now familiar with them a little bit. That's been out for a year and a half or so, and the shock is wearing off on people that we no longer call them dicots, we call them eudicots. But we've color-coded those. So we have the magnolias that basically sort of an orange color at the top of the book, or band at the top, and then sort of a burgundy, purplish color for the eudicots, which is most of the book, and monocots are green. And then each family is organized alphabetically within those groups. And in each family, we've kind of gone ahead and tried to get most of the genera lined up alphabetically, but there are some exceptions. If we get groups, particularly like in the Asteraceae, where some of the plants are very similar to one another, we actually lump them all together, even if their names are sort of scattered across the board. It's not really that big a thing here. Usually a leaf bathed with sheaths, or sheaths or not, the leaves are radiculate, and the flowers are in multiples of 3. Basically, it's a primitive group as compared to, and that's why it was kind of dropped out of that. This is something that was probably around in the Cretaceous and such at the very, very beginning of the angiosperm, the flowering plants. Yeah, so it's a very primitive one. Then the eudicots, which most people are familiar with, the reticulated leaf veins also, but flowers are usually in sets of 4 or 5. Got that one in orange. Of course, we actually describe in the book how you separate them, so you can just go look that up. And then the monocots in green, usually parallel venation on the leaves is one of the main elements, and then flowers in parts of 3 parts. Of course, then you wouldn't know that if you looked at a grass. They're a little tricky because they're not quite that visible. So this is actually the magnolias, and we have all of them that are in the book up here. So all you have to do is just memorize these 2 species, and you're done with that group. That's the California Bay Laurel, which is a more of a montane tree in Southern California. It gets a little lower elevation as you go farther north. And it's known mostly for its very, very delightful aromatic smell. It is related to the laurel that's used in cooking. And actually, you can kind of replace this one with this one. So I think the European one is a little bit has a little bit of your bite to it. It's got a neat little fruit, and it's definitely showing that sort of flowers and sets of three parts on it. Then the other one that we've got down here is part of the lizard tail family, Yorba Manza. It's basically lives in sort of swampy habitats, wet places that have a little bit of salt water mixed in, so alkaline characters. And lizard tail family, I love the name for that one. The plant itself, though, is kind of interesting because it looks like you're seeing that nice white, what looks to be like petals with a sort of a cone at the middle. That's actually not really what it looks like. The white around the base is actually a bract. It's not really a petal. And then, in fact, if you look on that little flower cone, you can see that there's all kinds of little white spots here. Those are the actual individual flowers. The bract is actually under the flowers, under the inflorescence. That's sort of the inflorescence for it. And then even on the flower, which there's a nice little diagram in the book showing you the cutaway of what the flower looks like. It has one white, what looks like a petal, but no, it's another bract. Again, still not a petal. It's sort of a very unique group anyway. So that's it for the smallest group, and then the largest one, we'll get back to Bob.
So we have the eudicots, and here's a copy of the book. So in case you haven't seen it, the color tabs he's talking about, top of the page, which you can see from there.
We had that laying over there.
So the eudicots are here, and that's the bulk of the book. So we start off with things like elderberry. We have blue elderberry locally. It's the only one we have. Turns out what we've been calling Mexican elderberry isn't. Guess where that lives? Mexican elderberry lives in Mexico. We've been mistakenly calling, all botanists, all biologists, for many years have been calling the elderberries up here Mexican elderberry. It's not. It's actually blue elderberry. So that was straightened out by someone in their PhD that came out in 1996. Then we skipped ahead here, show you poison oak, which everybody should know, right, really well. So in poison oak, we also have the plant and the close-up of the female flowers, because their flowers are one sex only. They have female and they have male flowers. And then down below we have 4 lookalikes, or I should say 3 lookalikes plus poison oak. And I'll just tell you that we are allowing people to photocopy just that page and give it to visitors if you're leading a walk. Now I don't want to see a big old handful of them sitting on the counter. That's not the point. It's if you're going to lead a walk, a nature walk, you may copy the poison oak page and hand it to people. That's fine by us. If you're just doing a walk, because I want people to know poison oak. We don't want people to get hurt. One of the big functions of this book is for use by docents. Okay. Then we move on. We have things like milkweeds. We have several species of milkweeds here. We also have something really special in the book, and that is insects that are associated with the plants. So here is the milkweed section where we have the small milkweed bug, the large milkweed bug, a leafhopper assassin, oleander aphids, which are from Africa. Unfortunately, they're a pest, but they're everywhere. Milkweed borer beetle, whose larvae tunnel in the roots of milkweed plants. And they're natural, they're native, and they squeak when you bother the adult. They're very cool. And in the upper right, there's the milkweed leaf beetle, whose larvae also live in the roots of the plant, and the adults eat the leaves. They don't squeak, but they're very, very pretty. Western dogbane moth, the caterpillar feeds on dogbane, which is in the same family. And then, of course, who doesn't love the monarch? And we also have another milkweed butterfly here. We have the queen. And the queen actually lives in the desert, and the queen will fly over the mountains and fly through here and lay eggs on our milkweed. And that queen butterfly picture was taken at Riley Park near Costa de Casa, and the caterpillar was taken at the Fullerton Arboretum. And then monarchs you can see everywhere. I know you get them here too. But I have seen queens all along the coast. And so we give a history of those. Like here under the monarch, the epithet was given in 1758 by C. Linnaeus, Carolus Linnaeus, in honor of Plexippos, a son of Belus, the king of Egypt. 2 of his brothers were a pair of twins named Aegyptus and Danaus. So I always give a little history because I'm a history of science buff. And so we squeeze that in everywhere. Like the milkweed borer, named in 1852 by John LeConte for the black spot on either side of the base of the front wings. And it tells you the word Tetraops basalis. Basalis is Latin for basal. Because once you know the meaning of the scientific name, or at least the epithet, it often tells you something about the critter and gives you something to remember. So we did that with plants and animals. Then we go on to the sunflower family. Now this family is massive. It's massive. There are hundreds of species just right here in Orange County. just right here. So we had to explain to you the parts of the sunflower family. Here is the version for left brain analytical people. The drawings are for the right brain graphically minded people. And then on the next page, we've got a table for the left brain analytical people and a nice drawing of the flower heads for the right brain graphical people. Okay? Fred and I travel both worlds. So we knew we needed to have this in here. So it teaches you how to tell a sunflower. Now, think of a sunflower head. All right? Think of a sunflower seed still in its little box. That box contains one seed, right? You ever pop open a sunflower? Okay, that's one flower. One whole flower. There's one seed in a case. The case is the ovary. What's on top of that is the rest of the flower, all the reproductive parts, so the petals fused into a cylinder. Okay, that's one flower. So really a sunflower head is a flower head or collection or composite of many, many little flowers. And so we give you the anatomy of the flower heads on the right. So here, close to me, we show the arrangement of those individual flowers called florets and how they're structured and shaped. And then the right, how they're arranged in different heads and what we call the head based on which florets are in that head. So it really walks you through that. Spend a little time on these 2 pages. If you're going to look at anything in the sunflower family, your brain will thank you. Okay? It really would be a whole lot easier to find sunflowers in the book. So we have things like Rayless Arnica, which took us years to find. Years. Peter Raven, when he was a student in the late 50s locally, found this plant in the Santa Ana Mountains and collected some. And all we had to work with were his note, 4 miles past the forest gate, Upper Silverado Canyon. That's a bigger area than you think it is. That doesn't mean sitting by the side of the road. That means how far up past the gate he went and then did some hiking. We finally found it. So this plant is a perennial, which means it has roots that live for good, and it pops up, grows, flowers, sets seed, and then dies off above ground till next year, as long as there's rain next year. So it's only visible for 3 weeks, a month. You've got to just get it just right. So you have to find the population. You have to get it just right. You can't identify it very well from the leaves. You need it to be in flower, and it's on a steep slope. So it was really hard to find. And I even got to sit with Peter Raven and show him the book and tell him a story. And we both swapped stories about Rayless Arnica. He just retired from the Missouri Botanic Garden. He is the most famous botanist on the planet. And I got to sit with him and show him the book. I took a picture of him holding my book. It's very cool. Really cool. Now we also have things like California sagebrush and showing the silver and the blue-green form and a couple of little feathered guys. Birds, I think they call them, hang around. Coastal California gnatcatcher, a little photo by Rob Hamilton, and then below, blue-green gnatcatcher, a photo I took. The bird was this close to me at the San Joaquin Wildlife Sanctuary. You know these cute little birds will get right in your face. They're very curious. And they are very important birds. They're important members of the community. When you find that plant, you might find that bird. So we put the birds in saying, hey, keep an eye out for these guys. Don't chase them away. They're very, very interesting. So here's one of my favorite plants that only comes up after its seeds have been burned. It came up, Vic and I actually found it on a field trip. This is Red Raid Posea. Posea is the genus named for David Hulse, was his name. And look at that thing. Is that fantastic? Magenta and yellow? Come on. And it's this tall. It's gorgeous. This thing is beautiful. I love this plant. It took us years to find it, and if you're an artist, you're going to go, oh, look at the geometry and the patterns in the fruiting heads of this thing. You just love it. It's a great plant. We have thistles too. Locally, we have some non-native thistles and we have native thistles. We put them all in the book, and they're very important sources of pollen and nectar for many types of insects, like this beautiful metallic mason bee, this blue guy here, the steel blue. Photo doesn't capture how beautiful this bee is. It can't. It's a gorgeous bee, and they're everywhere on Santiago Peak. They're everywhere, and they're on these thistles. Then we have butterflies like the pale swallowtail, which love to nectar on this. And then this lesser goldfinch will tear open the older heads and eat the seeds. So it would be there, thrash the head, eat some seeds, look at me, and then thrash the thing and look at me, and thrash the thing. I'd take picture. It's probably 40 minutes of watching that bird. watching each other. It's probably waiting for me to eat
Bob's
too.
very patient.
Yeah, well, that's the nature of this whole book, let me tell you. So, and it's just a taste of some of the really cool critters that we put in the book. Then we have things like goldfields. Who doesn't love those? They're beautiful, delicate flowers. And then down here, common tidy tips with these really broad. All right, so here we have tidy tips. You can see they've got these outer flowers. That's one flower right there with these huge, broad rays. And they're yellow at the base with white tips. They're called tidy tips. Nice and white and tidy at the tip of the corolla right here. Now in the sunflower family, the back of the flower head tells you a lot and actually is more necessary for identification than the front. That's why we include the back of the flower head. Look at the difference just in these two. You see how these little green parts are triangular? And here they're long and skinny. That's a really important feature of identification. So you need to flip the thing over and look at those. And we give them to you in the book. A lot of books don't do that. Leaves have little finger-like projections. Okay, now we go on to the facing page, which is the most beautiful flower in all of California. And that is the one named after me. This is Allen's daisy. This is something that actually Fred discovered in 1983 in Dana Point and went, wow, this looks kind of different. And we were actually together, but we both went, wow, it's supposed to look like that. See the golden flower here? That's golden daisy. That's the normal form that occurs in everywhere in Southern California except the deserts and except Orange County. In Orange County, they have white tips like that. And so everyone kind of looked at it, yeah, it's a little different looking. Well, when I found it, it is in Limestone Canyon, I found it and I actually collected some in 2003 and sent specimens to my major professor at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, who is a world authority on the sunflower family. I said, Dave, we've been looking at this thing. What is this thing? Is it really golden daisy or is it something a little different? And he looked at it and went, geez, it's different. He dissected it out, consulted the other sunflower expert in the country. There's two of them. And they both said, this thing needs to be named. It's different enough that it needs to be named. First off, it's physically different. Second off, the seeds are a different color between the two. And third, they don't live together. That's a big deal. And they don't live together. Right? Orange County only and everywhere else. So he gave it a name, and that was pretty cool. You could see that these parts on the back are slender and very sharply pointed. See this? Okay, don't look at the color because they can be green or red. And then so kind of fleshy and skinny, broad and triangular, skinny and very sharply pointed. I mean really sharp pointed. And just to show you it's not tidy tips, because a lot of people compare the two, I took a tidy tips and put an Allen's daisy in front of it. The epithet was given in 1840 by Thomas Nuttall for its golden yellow rays, Latin aureus equals golden. Our form in Orange County was named in 2007 by David J. Keel in honor of R.L. Allen, one of his former students and lead author of this book. So now you know how to identify the most beautiful flower in all of California. Okay. So then we go on to a family. This is the borage family, and I did an interesting thing here. There's so many species of borages that are hard to tell apart. I did a little thing here on the left. I put flowers from each one of them on their own page, on a page like this, with a little description how you tell them apart from the others. And then of course they all get their own half-page or full-page entry. So you can see here's half-page entry of that one, which is right there, and here's the entry for that one right there. All right. Phacelias are kind of tough to identify. Then we go on to things like the mint family. And here's white sage, for example, which has one of the weirdest pollination mechanisms around. One of my favorites. And so, because it's in the book, I'm going to tell you how it works. So here's our white sage. Here's the plant. It has really tall stalks of flowers. And each flower starts off by being closed. They have two lips. Okay? The flower has two lips, all faced like the picture, two lips. They've got an upper lip and a lower lip, and that's typical for the mint family. But in white sage, the upper lip doesn't exist. There's no upper lip. There's just a lower lip. So there's a tube that leads to the top of the ovary and to the nectar. So when the flower first comes out of bud, it does this, and the bottom lip goes up, and it closes off the tube into the ovary and nectary. So that's why the top flower is facing up. So there's one flower here, see it facing up? That's the bottom lip going up. Here's the bottom lip going down. All right, we'll get there in a sec. So that's one flower. The bee is on a different flower. That bee comes along, hovers along, grabs a hold of that lip, and stops flying. And because they're nice big heavy bees, it makes the lower lip go and bend down. Okay, this is a different flower, right? Here's the lower lip going under. The bee's holding on. Now the bee can get to the opening, which is right there, use its long tongue and lick the nectar out of the base. The nectar is on top of the ovary in this plant. The ovary is at the base of the flower inside. So now it can get to it. This is the male part of the flower called the stamen, and they have 2 stamens. Most mints have 4. And the female part of this upper flower is hanging out right down here. It's sticking out straight. The female part of the lower flower is right here, right down there. They're both purple tipped. Here is the male part of that flower on the bottom flower. So as the bee gets closer to the flower, grabs the petal, the female part of the flower strikes the side of the bee, sometimes even striking the wings, hits the bee. If the bee already visited another white sage flower, it's got pollen on its sides, and the pollen is transferred to the female part. That's called pollination. And then, so now the bee comes in. It's already been whacked by the female part of this flower as it comes in. Right? Actually, it was whacked by this one. Grabbed a hold, it goes down, the lip comes down, the male parts of the flower, these 2 that were standing straight up, now whack the bee covered in pollen. Then the bee leaves, and after the bee is visited, that bottom lip stays open, like this on the bottom. So here you can see 1 stamen here, 1 stamen here, and a female part hanging out here to the side. All right? That's how pollination occurs in white sage. So pollination is just the transfer of pollen. It's not fertilization. That's the next step. But pollination is the first. Now, what we've noticed with white sage is that after this has happened, we should see lots of flowers open. We don't always see that. And the ovary should swell with seeds. We're not seeing that very much anymore. If you go up to white sage plants that look like they should be, their flowers are done, they look like they should have been pollinated, they should be growing seeds, you feel the ovary and it's empty.
Not with bees.
That means we're missing bees.
Yeah.
What bees pollinate this? Only carpenter bees, the big bees that are all black if they're female and golden if they are male, and bumblebees, the ones that are black with yellow stripes. European honeybees will visit these, but they cannot pollinate them, right? They cannot. They don't know what to do, first off, and their body is just shaped wrong. All right? So we need these bees. Now, how do we get more of these bees? We promote more habitat that carpenter bees like. Where do carpenter bees nest? In wood. And in the wild, in old dead yucca stalks. They love to nest in those. They tunnel into them and they make nests out of them. It's just great. In some rural areas like Silverado Canyon, they do tend to tunnel into people's eaves in their house. So people in the canyons like to spray them, which is unfortunate. What you can do though is you can put out some wood that you're okay with them tunneling into. They won't go after your eaves. If they do, you keep filling the hole that they start to tunnel into, and then they'll just give up after a while. You don't need to use sprays. Okay, moving on. We've got more mints in here. Then we move on to the monocots, and that would be Fred.
Okay, so the monocots, when we get to that group, you know it because you've got the green band at the top of the page. It's pretty funny though, because the whole monocot section is about a third the size as just the Asteraceae in the eudicot, so it's just a tiny portion of the book. But it's an important group. A lot of people recognize monocots. Things like lilies, for example, are favored in horticulture, and many people are familiar with yuccas and agaves and such. So it's an important group. Usually it's a parallel leaf vein. A lot of them have veins that remind you of grass leaves, and they have 3 flowers, as I mentioned earlier. So a couple of the representatives we've got for that, we have here soap plant. We have 2 different species. These have been moved around into various families over the years. Most of us originally grew up with these things being in the Liliaceae. As the Liliaceae started breaking up, and depending on who you talk to, it broke up a long time ago. It just took a long time to convince other scientists that it really was separate families. And the genetic studies have definitely shown that. Well, agaves, you just do these big plants with these succulent bases and tall stalks and stuff. Well, it doesn't really look a whole lot like an agave. But if you're down in Mexico, there are a number of species that are sort of intermediate, and you can start to see why they might throw this in the agave seed. It's really the flower structure is important. So our two species, the wavy leaf soap plant is the one we have all over Orange County in wildland areas, particularly coastal sage. And it's a big plant. There's a cutaway over here you can see on the that's your, I just keep forgetting this, your left, yes. I'm not very good with my left or right either. Has a really, really big ball. When I'm working on a book on lilies, and when I dug one up to look at the thing was like a hard ball. It was this big. It was really huge. I was really impressed. The plant stalks can be 7 feet tall, and you can see the flowers in that lower area there. They're kind of spidery looking. They're big, but they tend to bloom only in the evening or in the morning and part of the night. They're basically crepuscular type blooming arrangement. Whereas our other one is a much smaller plant. It gets to maybe 3 feet tall, often shorter. It's a lot more delicate. It lives in hard, heavy clay soils, and we pretty much get it mostly in the eastern and southern part of the county. And it's really, if you get like San Diego, it's all over the place. That's the small flowered soap plant. So the farther south we go, the more common it is. And it's got really tiny flowers by comparison. My latest one of those spectacularly in Southern California is the Australian Humboldt tiger lily, which is, this is a life-size illustration of okay, it's not quite that big. But it's a pretty darn good sized flower. It can be about that big to get a good sized one. And it's just spectacular with the orange and the black on it. And then there it is with one of Bob's excellent photos. We could just put insects in the pictures with the flowers, showing how large it is. For a swallowtail, it's about the same size. And this is actually the primary pollinator for it, right? Yeah. I don't remember the larvae. They don't live on that though. They have something else. Yeah. Probably the same flower. No, it's a different flower. And it can have some absolutely stunning inflorescences. It's a big plant. I mean, it usually gets much taller than we can be. It's got a pretty whorl leaves. I don't remember if I showed that or not, but I actually haven't quite ever seen it like this. This is one of Bob's spots. And it's got to be just stunning when you've got that many flowers. You'll find this in shady canyons like in Silverado Canyon, San Diego Canyon, parts of San Juan Canyon, usually kind of growing underneath the oaks and close to the water courses. So it likes a fairly moist habitat. It likes to have something with a bit of shade on it and moderate elevations. And it's also something that's blooming in pretty much the end of May into early July perhaps, or just June, right about the time you get some big nasty biting insects to help you to appreciate it. This is good. Here's a couple of our friends, and it gives you a good feeling for the scale of this plant. What we haven't told you is they're actually about the same size and height as hobbits. No, that's not true. Actually, they're pretty normal height. So that's about 7 feet. All right. So that was sort of our rundown on if you get a book in your hand or if you've got one, you'll see there's a lot more than just the few species we touched up on here. At the very end of the book, with a brown top, we have a section that kind of gives you a few hints about where you can see wildflowers. And the opening page just tells you if you want to look at coastal areas, foothill or mountain. It kind of just gives you a rundown of some of the areas you might go poke around in. And this section is actually tied to a couple good hiking books that we've got for Orange County, written by Karen Klein. And
Jerry Shaw.
And she was very disappointed that this book wasn't done before she put those books out. We have some nice little maps in the back. It just focuses on some of the areas you can go to the better areas to go look at wildflowers, and gives you a little idea about how to get there and where the trail arrangement is, and then just briefly a couple of the species you might see there. Oh, we only have one of those, and then Bob is actually in there.
There's an index. Okay. Yeah. Oh, yay. Just 3 months of my life, every waking minute, and writing an index. So exciting. And so, anyway, there's the index. So if you have an idea what something's called, it's got the names, the common name, the scientific name, of the birds that are in the book, the insects that are in the book, and of course the plants. Here are the pages where it's mentioned bees, and then we go the different types of bees that are in the book, and then we go beets, because beets are mentioned, because they're good for you. And then there's beetles, and different kinds of beetles. Boop, lots of beetles.
There's
So-
about 150 species of insects covered in the book.
Yeah,
Wow.
quite a bit. Yeah. Okay, and then for how the index really should have gone, we need to go turn to my wife who was working tonight and couldn't do this, so I'm going to do her part. So she said, you know, that index is wonderful if you know what something's called, but what if you don't know what it's called? What if you have this pretty pink flower? And you go, what's a pretty pink flower? I don't know what it's called. Well, she said, what about you came up with some kind of list that people could use, kind of an index that's arranged by flower color, like things that have, list out things that have white petals and things that have orange petals and things that have red to red-violet petals. And then tell me things that are blue to blue-violet petals and things that have green to yellow petals. And then things that have brown to deep rust-colored petals. And then tell me what pages those are on, and I can look for them and try to figure out my flower. So she came up with it, and I said, wow, okay, great. So you're going to write this, right? And she said, yes, I will write this for you. So when the book was done and the index was done, and it was time to write this color index, I said, okay, time for you to write the color index. And she said, I don't think so. So I wrote the color index, and she proofed it. And so here is the color index that she envisioned 10 and a half years before the book was done. And it is like this. It's called the Quick Index by Flower Color. Pink is her favorite color, so that's the color of the page top for this in the back of the book. So whites, which is white and kind of off-white. Things like Aurelia, page 62. Ash, page 291. So if you've got a white-flowered plant, you just open it up, you go white flowered, and you start looking at these and comparing the picture versus your plant, and you can narrow it down. Now there's lots of white flowered things. Then there's yellow flowered things. Then it goes down to orange flowered things, and be glad if it's an orange flowered thing because there aren't very many of them. It won't take you very long at all. And then red, and red of course is a family of colors, so we've got a bunch of things here. Then we go on to blues and the greens and brown flowers. Then we go on to her flower, which was this right here, and she said, aha, there's my flower. So she went through all of the reds, red includes pink, and found out that this is owl's clover. It's on page 303, and there it is down there, I highlighted it. But then you look at it closely and you find that, hey, those pink things aren't the flowers. Those are the bracts. Remember when Fred mentioned bracts? Bracts are modified leaves that are associated with flowers. And so the bracts are pink, the flowers are white. So we've got the wrong thing. So I said, aha, and I cross-referenced it. And so owl's clovers are also listed under white on page 303, and there it is. And that is the index by flower color. And she always gets a bigger applause than I do. So moving on. Me too. Then in the back, near the back of the book, we have a quick index to everything that's like what the bird books have done, kind of a short summary of the index. That's on the inside. Give you some of the major plants. Okay, and that is our book. Thank you.